edition of Listen Up a Minute. I'm your co-host, John Dowl, and I'm along with the musical legend slash technological expert, Mr. Bill McGee. And I have to say, without him, we'd be talking to ourselves. Bill, hello to you, and thank you again for making this possible. Our guest is AIDS advocate slash Renaissance person slash extraordinary woman, period, Miss Deidre Johnson. And you will find out why I said all that once we get into this interview. Deidre, hello to you, and how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you? I'm just so highly honored to be in the midst of both of you two, especially music legends in their own right. Because,
Oh, yes. Oh,
I would
yes.
say I grew up with your music because then that would make both of us, seem kind of uh, elderly, but we just seasoned.
Deidre, first of all, thank you for joining us. And I guess I'll start off with the basic question. What led you to become an HIV AIDS advocate?
Yes, probably the love of my life story for real. I was born and raised, believe it or not, in Richmond, Virginia. My dad went to Virginia State and then decided to join the military. So we traveled all over the world and had an amazing life. And then we settled in Alexandria, Virginia. And I decided to go to James Madison University. I was a pre-med major and
Oh,
minor in
nice.
psychology. And parents were amazing parents, did what parents are supposed to do and never went out and partied or anything, but then college hit. College hit, and had an amazing time at JMU. I think I had more time at the parties than I did at in class, and that was a little bit reflected in them grades.
I've heard that
And
before.
been there, done that, got the t-shirt and a bumper sticker and working on that hat. So I went there and I actually got pregnant my sophomore year with my oldest son, who's now 24. While I was in the midst of, figuring life out and working and whatever, I ended up finding, well, I don't know if I found them or they found me, but ended up meeting this person. And it was a very interesting relationship. We're going to say for the least, it was really traumatic. We had a lot of traumatic issues, physically, mentally, sexually abusive. And at one point, we recognized that they left from Texas for Texas, and I followed. And while I was there, 3 months into our stay in El Paso, Texas, I found out I was pregnant with my second child. And not only did I find out that I was pregnant, I also found out that I was HIV positive. So that began the road to number one, getting out of that unique traumatic
Mhm.
experience. And that whole process, you just start to become an advocate for yourself. And then, of course, the second part was trying to make sure that, my child, I did the best that I could to make sure not to transmit HIV to my child. And so, long story short, the first road, remember, we had to get out of that. So I left in the middle of the night and came from El Paso, Texas, about 6 months pregnant. February 9th, never forget it, rolled out and got here on the 12th pretty much, and haven't looked back since. I found an agency in Northern Virginia because that's where my parents now reside, and started working for this organization, Northern Virginia AIDS Ministry. And they would do like an HIV 101, and then they would have a speaker, and that's kind of how I got my start doing that. My first presentation was at TC Williams High School from
Mm.
Remember the Titans. That was my very
Mhm.
first presentation. And a few months later, at the time, I was actually pregnant when I would do these presentations. So, people, and then I looked a little younger, a little thinner, not too much. But literally, the youth and the young folk really identified with me. And then on May 9th, I had the pleasure to bring into this world my now 19-year-old. And he was born HIV negative. But in that moment, just having to transition from Texas to Virginia, the information that was provided for me was, I had it, what medical professionals didn't necessarily. So there was a lot of discrimination, um, stigma. They literally at the hospital were yelling down the hallway, hey, you got to be careful. You know, she's got HIV.
Mm, mm.
And so after, you know, I had to literally tell them, you cannot prep me because I had a planned C-section. And even to get to the planned C-section part, I had to fight for that because they told me that I could have a vaginal birth. I
Mm.
did not want to do that because I had the percentage of passage was 5 to 7%. And I had researched and found out that if I did a C-section, it would be 1 to 3%. And so I went to the doctor, to specialist, and he was like, I don't understand why you want to do this. It's, you know, it's easier just to do the vaginal. And I said, well, sir, if this was a
Mm.
life or death situation and this was your child, what would you do? And long story short, he put that John Hancock right on that paper. And we, you know, had to plan for it. And even in the process, my water broke before the C-section. So they were really
Wow.
trying to hurry
Mm.
and push the process
Mm.
along. But for a parent that is birthing a child at that time, you have to do, there's at that time, it was a drip of AZT, what we know as AZT. And then the second was an antibiotic. And so it's 2 hours before you can deliver. And all of that, they were like, no, no, ma'am, no, sir, this is the protocol. And I literally had my mom
Mm.
hand in the paper and was like, this is the protocol and we will follow it to the T.
Mm.
And so that's another second step to where advocacy came, because my thing was, if it was happening to me, who else was it happening to?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, my mouth is probably, a lot of folks in the HIV community know me as Deidre Speaks. So Deidre Johnson is my government. But Deidre Speaks is, you know, I just realized in that first speaking moment that that's what I do. Deidre speaks
That's amazing.
injustice. Deidre speaks about HIV and how they be treated, because the next step was, even we haven't even made it out the hospital. So y'all, you see we're even more reasons, because
Mm-hmm.
while we're in the hospital, I gave birth, and in Zion's bassinet, so you can see in the nursery all those gorgeous kids. Well, his bassinet had a red index card that said wear gloves.
Mm.
And from that moment on, I was like, never again will another baby
Mm.
that is born from a HIV positive person ever have that happen again. And so
Stigma.
I just, yes. So
Mm.
I just busted my tail to do whatever it took, sharing my story. And when probably people were like, I don't want to hear this mess, but doing it because I wanted folks that were living HIV negative to now see, like, if see me, because what most folks thought, as stereotypical as it was drugs, it was prostitution, it was all of these quote unquote negative things. And those aren't necessarily negative things. They're things that people have to do sometimes to cope and to live. So I just decided to speak out about it. And then fast forward now 20 years. So I've been living HIV positive 20 years. Now we're working on changing laws in Virginia and HIV criminalization. And
Yeah.
so,
Let me ask you a question about that, because reading about you and then hearing you speak, you've been fighting this battle for quite some time. And it's like you're coming into your own at this point in time. I read that, you know, you waited till your son to go to college, moving on. And it's kind of like freed you to just put on the boxing gloves and duke it out. But you're doing so many things, and I know you're working on Georgia, in Georgia, on the decriminalization, like you've done here in Virginia, and you've had a lot of success here in Virginia. And I want you to share, because our time is more limited than we'd want, and your story is so amazing. So share with us the decriminalization process for people who are HIV and AIDS positive. Share with us what the crux of the matter is, because I really didn't, in my mind, it's been so, put to another side that I hadn't even realized it was still a crime to basically be HIV positive. So talk to us about that, please.
Sure. So here's what happened back in the 1980s and 90s when, we were at the height of the AIDS epidemic. Um, we had this young person by the name of White, and they founded all of these funds, and we all know different celebrities came on board. And long story short, upon his passing, Congress created a White Care Act, and in order for states to get that money, they actually had to implement criminalization laws. So at the time, they thought that it was, well, if we criminalize you for HIV, then you'll stop the spread and the spread will stop. And so that's what they thought initially that it was going to do, and hinder people from maybe engaging in sex, drug use, or anything else. Of course, we know quite did the opposite. And all of that to say, the other piece to that, and in the mid 90s, especially in Virginia, Nushan Williams, gentleman back in the 90s who was, they called him the AIDS monster. Just FYI, Mr. Williams is still incarcerated. He served his time of 12 years, and it is now 10 years later, and he's still incarcerated.
Wow.
And so we're working on Free Nushan campaign to get him home, because now we know science is different than what it was in the 90s. In Virginia, this is where, it kind of hits home. In Virginia, African Americans make up 19% of the total population of Virginia. However, we account for over 58% of new HIV diagnoses.
Wow.
Yes. So we already now know this is a racial justice issue. And so with that, in Virginia, our laws, as soon as Mr. put his name on the dotted line, this will change. But currently, what it states in Virginia, and it's called the Infected Sexual Battery Law, is two things. Well, several things. One, you could be charged with intent. You could be charged with intent if you're living with HIV, hepatitis, and syphilis. We know that all of the cases have not been with hepatitis or syphilis, they have been charged with HIV. So it can be a class 6 felony if it is proven to be intent, which we know is up to 5 years in jail, $2,500 fine. The second piece of that is that if you're living HIV positive, if you're a person who's living with HIV, you could be charged with a class 1 misdemeanor if you do not disclose your HIV status prior to any engagement of any sexual act. The other pieces, we're not allowed to donate blood, even if it's something for ourselves, and or to tissue products, body product, any of that. Class 6 felony. And as well as if you are charged with solicitation and or anything drug related, you are mandated to do HIV tests. So what our law did is we took that away because, number one, already in the title of the bill, infectious sexual battery. We have had people who have literally, it's really a he said, she said game at this point. People break up, they go back and say that the person didn't disclose, and that's all it takes. What we wanted to do is to make sure that there was proof that there was that situation happening. We do believe that if you intentionally are trying to transmit HIV, that yes, there should be a punishment for that. We do believe that. But for those of us who are not intentionally transmitting HIV to anyone, we are being accused of that when there has been proof, whether the person has disclosed or not. But also, thanks be unto God with science, there's this wonderful campaign, and I'm also their ambassador, the U equals U ambassador, which is undetectable equals untransmittable, which means if I'm taking my medication, I'm at an undetectable status. That means I cannot transmit HIV to any of my sexual partners, whether condoms are used or not. So with that new science, we also know that we can donate blood even to each other living with HIV. And there have actually been successful transplants of kidneys and other body parts to people living with HIV that were, it was given from one HIV positive person to another. So we know that that can happen. So our science and our whole deal was, and we did away with the fact that we are specifically calling out HIV, syphilis, and hepatitis. Our law will expand the bill to where it would be inclusive of all sexually transmitted infections. Stigma and discrimination, gone. That's for everybody. When it comes to intent, intent is still there. If it is proven that it is intent, two things has to have when you go to charge for intent. One, that the person is HIV positive. Two, that the person is, well, again, this is all sexually transmitted infections now, that you got it from that person. And so they have to prove that you got it from them. Mm. Versus just saying, oh yeah, they did it. Yeah, I have HIV or whatever. And yeah, is it boom, bam, boom. Well, you got to go through a whole medical process to do some genome coding to see if this HIV and this HIV and this in the time period and all that great stuff. So we wanted to increase that burden of proof so that people would not just willy-nilly have been charged with that.
So question, if it's in now with the medications that are available, if it's undetectable, how then do people, how do you then try to say that somebody infected you or whatever? If it's, you see what I'm going in? So talk to me about that.
Actually, you already said it. That's what we were trying to, the aha moment. That's what we were trying to create, was the aha moment of just, it can't be because you have it, you did it. No, I mean, now you got to bring into play who's partners, because not everybody's sleeping with just one person.
Right.
Hey, no tea, no shade, do your thing. But at the same time, now you got to bring into play. Now, a lot of people don't want to bring in their personal lives into the court. So now I'm bringing in your personal life, I'm bringing in your medical, and I'm bringing, so it's not to deter you. We want you to have the facts. We just don't want you to walk on he said, she said. We want you to, every party involved, to have the facts. And that's what we did. No longer do you have to disclose your status. And again, it goes back to what you said. If you're undetectable, there's no way. And then on top of that, here's the other bonus that, if you will, the other bonus is that a lot of people were deciding not to get tested to find out their HIV status. So they knew not to be criminalized because they knew these laws existed.
Right.
We, at the top of the list, was trying to knock the barrier out for people to have access to care and treatment.
Sure.
A couple of things stood out to me when you said you were in the delivery room, how you had your mother, and I'm guessing your father too, advocating for you. And I think about so many people who go through normal pregnancies, if you will, or normal hospital care that don't have that type of advocacy. And they basically get treated like third-class citizens by healthcare providers who take an oath. And part of that oath is to do no harm, but it's just not happening.
And think about it, we go into every space with our own biases, and even doctors, and nurses and everybody do that too. I can tell you many horror stories, and one in particular, one of my really great friends in advocacy was in the room by herself. And long story short, because of her HIV status, they did not do everything that they could have done for her child. And her child lived 24 hours. And they pretty much were like, listen, you're HIV positive, get your tubes tied, like and that, that's it, that's all.
That's all we can, that's sad.
And this is just 7 years ago.
That's sad, that's sad.
So
look, tell us a little bit about what you were able to accomplish in Virginia with ECHO VA, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that, and so that we can share that with our audience.
Sure. Like you said, was coming into my own. I recognized my kids were, grown. And so I just started learning about advocacy, how you do it, and ended up in Indianapolis. There are conferences across the country in this place. Zero Project actually invited us to come, myself out to come, and it's called HIV is Not a Crime. And while we were there, they had us set up in states by table. And when I got there, there was only one other person at the table, and then another person. So 3 people in Virginia were just represented. So we
Hmm.
recognized in that moment that we needed to do something. One of those people happened to be Dr. Cedric Pulliam. And the next day we got to ripping and running and saying, what can we do for Virginia? And long story short, we came up, this is June of 2018, we came up with ending criminalization of HIV and over incarceration in Virginia
Hmm.
coalition. So we created that in June of 2018. November 2018, we had our first strategic planning meeting, and our next goal was 2019. We were going to do just education. So we presented at all kinds of conferences, US conference on HIV and AIDS. And a lot of these conferences, we were the only presentation about HIV criminalization.
Hmm.
And so we recognized that other states were doing the
Hmm.
work, and now we had to set the footprint. And so back in 2020, a gentleman from Northern Virginia decided to, I'm trying to tiptoe through the roses, but he decided to introduce a bill about HIV criminalization. He reached out to us, and long story short, we told him, no ma'am, no sir, this is not going farther enough. Matter of fact, you will
Hmm.
penalize us even more. And so we fought against that bill, and we got that bill killed in the House. It was introduced in the House. We then said, you know what, we can do better. Actually, we talked to the gentleman, and he was like, you can't do better. You know, you can't tell too many sister girls that just, oh,
Oh,
you
I
can't,
know that.
oh, don't
No,
tell me I can't. And I
Mm-mm.
literally told him in the conversation, I said, you think I can't? I said, if I was a betting woman and it was allowable, I would bet you a Ruth Chris dinner I could.
Mm.
I can't wait till Governor Northam sign that thing.
Oh, so tell
So
us, has the bill passed?
the bill has gone through the Senate.
Okay.
We had Mamie Locke from, I believe it is the Norfolk area. She was one of
Yes.
our champions, as well as Senator Jennifer McClellan, who, like I said, we
McClellan,
done.
yeah, right.
Yes, that I literally we got to writing after we told them, you bet I can't, you
Beautiful.
bet you I can. We wrote
Good,
this bill
good,
up, and these
good.
2 women decided to take it on and champion it. And this was the bill that Cedric and I and our colleagues
So will it
created.
go before the House at the next session?
Nope, already been through the House and passed
Oh,
through the House.
oh, it
Nice,
passed through. So all we've been
nice.
waiting for
Yeah,
now is a signature.
signature from the governor.
Wonderful.
Nice.
Yes,
Congratulations.
yes,
Yes, yes,
yes.
yes.
Congratulations. So is that what you're trying to do in Georgia? Something similar?
No, actually, I'm in Georgia. I happen to come to Georgia because I'm working on my website.
Okay.
So I have an amazing family, like what people really wouldn't know. Surprise, technically I'm a nanny, like on some real. I technically am a nanny to my best friend's daughter. And the only reason why I haven't been in Georgia has been literally because of the pandemic and working on this bill. So I
Right.
just happened to come to visit for a few weeks just to hang out and just say, hey, I miss you, and work on my website and get all my business affairs in
Mm,
order, because once this is signed, I know amazing things are gonna open up.
Awesome. Awesome. So let
nice.
me ask the question real quick. Um, because I know we don't want to forget this part. If people wanted to donate to your cause and to what it is that you're doing, what's the mechanism?
Here's a amazing surprise. Echo operates off of
Mm.
strictly
Oh,
volunteer. Cedric and
oh,
I took our coalition members, which we have about 30 of them, in various aspects of work in Virginia, but mainly led by what we believe is we love to be led by MIPA, which is meaningful involvement of people living with HIV and AIDS. So a lot
Beautiful.
of our coalition members are people that are living with HIV, our allies, and people that are loving on
mhm.
us. So it's strictly volunteer. In how we are able to do that. And we have partnered with Positive Women's Network USA, as well as the Zero Project and Equality Virginia.
Nice,
So if you want to
nice.
hand out some monies to them, we greatly appreciate it because they're able to do that. But this isn't work that I
But
really get paid for.
that's
Nice.
amazing. Most
Yeah,
people
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, John?
Oh yeah.
I don't know of
Oh
many
yeah.
people that would say, well, we don't really solicit fundraising. You know, that
Yeah.
former Woodshire person down there is trying to get all
Hmm.
the money, the one who used to be, you know, who I'm talking about. He's like, give me all the money. And instead, people who are actually doing something that saves lives and
Right.
restores lives are saying, well, we really weren't asking for money. We do this because we love our brothers and sisters. And so we definitely thank you for that. And we
Definitely.
appreciate it. So, what then would you recommend people like myself who have been tested and have been HIV negative, people who are not, you know, because I think that's the other side of it is for those of us who are who are not necessarily at risk to being, you know, becoming HIV positive because we're in monogamous relationships or we're married or we're celibate or we're whatever, you know, whatever you know, we're not necessarily sitting up here worried about being HIV positive for those reasons. We still want to support. So what would people
Hmm.
do who
Hmm.
are not even quote unquote aware, you know, like I said, because I'll be honest with you, I had been so detached from that possibility. I think the last time I had to get my life insurance, they come in and, you know, they want to do all those kind of tests on you to make sure. And I've been so detached from that possibility for so many years that it almost had just.
Yeah.
So, what is it that people who are not HIV positive can do to support you?
One, watch this show. You know
Okay.
what I mean? And definitely, you can reach out to me. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter under Deidre Speaks. Please don't hesitate to ask questions. You know, send me to your kids, send me to your
Yes.
grandkids, send me to, because we all know we have at least somebody who may be at risk, or
Hmm.
whether or not,
Hmm.
but just
Sure.
are doing something or
Hmm.
in behaviors, because we can bring up a whole lot of different topics. One piece I would say, especially in the Black community, and especially raising a non-binary individual, is judgments. We have to start to break
Hmm.
away from judgmental behavior and
Hmm.
ideology. I can't even get out. Ology, and as well as stigma. To be frank, it
Hmm.
is not a very easy process for young folks to go through, and we had to get from point A to point B, and we have to be supportive as best as we can. Um, to say, figure it, however you got to figure it out, and I love you nonetheless. As
Hmm.
well as anybody, that is living with HIV. My story might be different from someone else's story, but the commonality is we're still living with HIV. And that is the part that, if anything, like if you talk to almost everybody I know in the HIV community, the one thing we are most adamant about is stopping the spread of HIV, and in addition, other things as well. So,
Hmm.
that is the part. We also want to bring light that this is a racial justice issue. This is
Yes.
a reproductive rights and justice issue. This is
Yes.
an economic issue. HIV just happens to be the middle of the wheel, and there's so many. It's not the root cause. The root causes are other things, and so we have to make sure. Look, if you know somebody, whether they're living HIV positive or not, give them a job.
Yeah.
I think I
Yes.
was watching a show where you all have been mentors for other young men, and the things that that is helpful. Talk about sex, okay? Maybe that's what I should say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about sex. And we have to have very frank and open conversations with everyone, not just our, because some of us, our partners are passing, we are divorcing, and we're figuring out life again. I've never had the pleasure of getting married, so I high five everybody that's going through that experience. Thank you, Jesus,
Hmm.
for the ministry of marriage. And, at the same time, although we may say people are married and monogamous, we don't know 24/7 all the time what everybody's doing.
Hmm.
And it's
Right.
not even on the sex tip. it can be on drugs. You
Right.
know, was speaking to a gentleman the other day, and they were talking about, just going to different spaces to get pleasure, and just these are things that they may not share with, say, their friends, or they may not share with even their spouses. Women like stuff too. I think there's a song out there, women, and we, it's healthy, but we got to talk about it. And we got to have frank, and we got to know the pros and cons, because most times it's always based on pregnancy, but there's more to having sex than getting pregnant. Although we know what it was created for, but at the same time, there's more to it.
Wow.
More to it.
That's great.
Yeah. And have these conversations, like, sipping sex, have a sipping sex party. And I know it's like, what in the world? Like, that don't even sound right. You're having your little glass of wine or whatever you like, even if it's water, and we're going to talk about sex.
Okay.
Now, folks, for those of you who are geographically challenged or not familiar with Texas, El Paso is in the western part of the state. So that's like going from Virginia Beach all the way out to Bristol, or the far end of Virginia, or from Danville up to Winchester. And Texas is the second largest state in the union. So to drive or go from one end of the state to the other, that in itself is a task. And then you're pregnant on top of that.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I took a bus, a Greyhound, and I was pregnant.
Wow. Oh, that was even better.
And I had surgery in body parts that we can't even begin to mention. So I was, in a lot of pain, and I just fed up and was like, forget it, I'm gone. But I will say, because of the cycle of abuse, that's another thing, is people going through abusive situations, don't just be like, oh, leave them. We got to have a plan. You got to have things in place. And I'm glad I had a plan and some family that was just like, I believe you when to see it. And when you got it, I'm here for you to catch you.
So before we wrap up, how are you all doing as far as the pandemic and the COVID-19 virus? How are your parents doing? Have you been vaccinated? Are you planning on getting vaccine?
My parents have both been vaccinated. They're still in Northern Virginia.
Good.
They've been pretty much masking up, staying at home and safe. Just want to kind of highlight something. The response to the COVID response, this whole deal is actually where the government is now taking place from the HIV epidemic and how they responded. So it's very similar and has been traumatic to people that are long-term survivors of HIV and AIDS. I am, as soon as I get back to Virginia, I am in the process of getting vaccinated. Of course, I'm very safe in the whole, I took a train here, so very safe. I don't go nowhere other than in the house. That's it. And that's, but please, folks, mask up, sanitize, do your thing, be socially distanced. Yes. I will say I've driven past places in Atlanta and they partying like rock stars out this camp. So I'm assuming everybody's gotten vaccinated, and that's why they're out there partying, living their lives.
Before we go, I really want to say, and you can chime in on this, I see a similarity to the perception of this than what we experienced when HIV first came out. And that's kind of sad because, when HIV came out, everybody's going like, okay, I'm going to wear protection, bump that, I'm going to get it. And then, and then they got it, and I'm not saying that for everybody. I'm just saying that there were some people that just heard it and didn't hear it. And we have something similar going on now, like you said about the people in Miami Beach doing the spring break thing and the partying. I'm just thankful, like for your parents and for myself. I've had my second shot, and see, I have 4 young grandkids in the house with me, and they want to go back to school. But I was explaining to them, until your grandparents have the vaccination, it doesn't make any sense for you all to go back to school and bring bring it back home to us who have the morbidities. So when I see these kids out there playing in Miami Beach, and I saw the video of the police having to intervene, and then what you're saying in Atlanta and Georgia and the same thing. I'm going like, y'all just don't get it, do you? Now here's a sister telling us about dealing 20 years later from HIV. 20 years down the road, you're still fighting and working on this battle. And these people don't understand that 20 years from now, because of what they're doing today, they may be still having to deal with the complications
Yeah.
of their behavior from today.
Yeah. But sometimes, and it's not being rude. Sometimes you have to live and learn, and you have, that's why even us in the HIV community, we're supportive as best as we can with processes and how this is working. And, we want to work alongside, and we are, really a lot of us are leading the HIV, the whole COVID-19 response, to be honest.
Sure.
A lot of us are leading these responses. So you're 1,000% right. The best that you could do is just sit back and say, well, whatever happens, we're still here to love and support you, however it goes.
Yes.
So,
Thank you.
Even that response of when somebody comes in and say, hey, I had COVID, we all, it's I want to be same thing with people like, hey, I got HIV. Whoa, easy player. So, so we're having to support people that have had COVID, and they're like, how did you deal with the stigma? How did you deal with the discrimination, the mental health piece? Because HIV is not just a physical disease, it's a mental disease as well, because
and
we're
social.
fighting.
It's a
Yes.
social.
I'm fighting it every day.
Stigmas, like you're saying, that's right.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much, Deidre.
Thank
we
you.
really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. I'd love to come back just anytime, I talk about all kinds of stuff, honey. I got jokes and stuff. Check out Mez Will Make Me Dance on my Facebook page on Deidre Speaks. I do a little dance every night around 10 o'clock if you tell me you took your meds, and that's just to encourage people to take their HIV medication or whatever you take, because it goes, you'll see. It's just a bunch of dances. So I just sing and dance and just encourage people to live their best life, especially living, learning, and experiencing life with no apologies.
Deidre, thank you again for joining us. Bill McGee, as always, thank you for making this possible. Executive producer Larry Brown and Derek Wright, who puts all this together. Thank you all for making this possible. This has been Listen Up a Minute.